Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're very lucky to have Dee back with us to discuss more complex infertility cases, including discussing mycotoxins, mold, autoimmunity, and different aspects of this. So this seems set to be a really, really interesting show. So welcome back, Dee. Thank you for coming back on.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
And yeah, I think just diving straight into it, I'd love to know a little bit more about some of the suspected root causes, perhaps in complex infertility cases, or perhaps some patterns that you're seeing with more complex cases that have come up in your own practice and beyond.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. So I think I think most practitioners will have a set of things they're working through to understand what those root causes might be. And for me, there are things, like hormone balance, microbiome health, blood sugar regulation. Like there's things that we'd ideally want to check for all of our clients and rule that in or out as whether it's
Hmm.
it being a factor. But I think when we start to see that nothing's really flagged, we're running those tests or doing those assessments, and we're realizing that actually everything we've looked at so far is looking perfectly normal. Like
Yeah.
there's no red flags here. After that, I start to wonder about, well, what else is going on that's holding someone's fertility back? Um, and I think there's a couple of themes really in terms of where I go next with this. And one is a lot of it's based around our immune system health. So,
Hmm.
from an immune system point of view, I think we can be having an inappropriate response to something in our environment or something in our body.
Hmm.
And I think that can go on to cause various fertility related problems. And I think the second thing is that once the body sees something that it should be fighting off or dealing with,
Mm.
rather than just thinking of that as an acute situation where the immune system steps in, fixes the problem and moves on, it gets stuck in this kind of longer chronic response. So the immune
Okay.
system sees that factor as a longer term threat, and that immune response is just continuing for much
Yeah.
longer than we would hope it to.
Mm.
And that can then go on and cause various problems, whether it's related to egg quality, implantation,
Mm.
inflammation.
Yeah. Do you know what kind of causes these triggers to like trigger this cycle and then yeah, what are the triggers for that?
Yeah, so I think some of the main things that I'm seeing are when people are having um, an increased response to things like chronic viruses. So the viruses is a really big category, and I know there's a lot of sort of practitioners focusing in on this area, particularly after COVID. I think it's really
Mm.
highlighted the fact that we've been carrying a higher viral load with us that is then impacting immune system health and lots of different mechanisms after that. So we've all had exposure to viruses. Like if we go way back, a lot of us have had chicken pox, and then
Mm.
the varicella zoster virus that causes chicken pox. Or we might have had the Epstein-Barr virus that can manifest as glandular fever. Um, Sometimes we have these viruses, but the issue is that we don't manifest the very obvious symptoms because of those viruses, and so it goes undetected. We
Mm.
don't understand that it's there. And really, what we're looking for our immune system to do is deal with that and then move on. Um, that's where things can go a little bit wrong because the immune system just sees it as an ongoing threat for a longer period of time, and it can be years or decades.
Mm.
That can really sort of be a stressor on our immune reserves in the background
Hmm.
and also on our energy as well, because those chronic viruses are a real energy drainer. And then we're
Yeah.
left with less energy to deal with other things like support egg quality
Mm.
and implantation and a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, I know even particularly with COVID, there's these studies increasingly emerging with long COVID. So you can definitely see the effects of, yeah, chronic fatigue and these viruses that are staying in our systems. But how do you normally detect that in someone? What are there any kinds of symptoms or signs, or how do you kind of come to that conclusion? that this may be the issue?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I think to know is that chronic viruses don't always manifest in very obvious symptoms, and that's why it's often not the first thing that we look at or
Yeah.
consider either, because it can present itself, to put it simply, just in weird and wonderful ways, whether that
Mm,
is fatigue, not sleeping well, low mood, increased anxiety, for
mm,
example, or from a fertility marker point of view, whether it is low ovarian reserve, for example, um, or menstrual cycle problems. So because it can present itself in different ways, it can become a little bit more difficult to understand if that is a factor for somebody.
mm,
And I think the only way to understand that is through testing. So we can test for various different types of antibodies to various different viruses. So it, I can dig into that a little bit, Jess, if that helps. But three key antibody types that we produce are either the IgA
mhm,
antibodies, IgM antibodies, or IgG antibodies. So these are just different immune molecules that we can
mhm,
produce. And depending on which are high or low, it gives us a sense of whether our immune system saw a virus a long time ago, built an immunity to it, and so
mm,
it's primed. The next time it sees it, it knows what to do and attack
yeah.
it and deal with it. Or whether the immune system is still seeing it as an ongoing threat in the
Mhm,
background. And getting that kind of information through, it gives us really a clear understanding of whether A, chronic viruses are a part of the picture, and B, exactly how the immune system is seeing that virus.
mm. And so, kind of whiling it back even further, I guess, what would you even define as a chronic virus, or these things like a high viral load? What do these mean to someone who's just perhaps even hearing these terms for the first time?
Yeah, so it could be a virus, like I said earlier, it could be a virus that we've been exposed to when we were much younger, for
Hmm.
example. But that virus is still pulling at the immune reserves even decades later.
Yeah.
The immune system's still seeing it as a threat, and that could be that varicella zoster virus that causes chickenpox or shingles as an
Mm.
adult. It could be the Epstein-Barr virus that causes glandular fever. It could be herpes simplex virus 1 or 2 that can cause cold sores or genital sores, for example. Um, it could be long COVID. It could be that the immune system is just having
Mm.
a longer term immune response to the COVID virus, for example.
Yeah.
There's a few others like cytomegalovirus and HPV6, for
Mm.
example. So sometimes we see that somebody's just having an ongoing immune response to one of those, but more often than not, we see that someone's having an immune response to two, three, four of those
Yeah.
viruses all at the same time. And that's why I sort of use that term of a high viral load, because it could be that the immune system is not having a huge response to just one of them, but it's having a bit of a response to several of those
Yeah.
at the same time. And that's super exhausting for the immune system, because if you think of it in the background, it's still seeing it as a threat, and it's still
Yeah.
trying to fight it off. And we're really, using a lot of our immune reserves up and a lot of our energy
Yeah.
up to fight those off.
Yeah. No,
The other thing,
no,
yeah,
carry
sorry.
on, carry on.
And over time, what we can see is it can present itself as a bit of an immune suppression picture as
Okay.
well. So the immune system's been so busy in the background,
Mm.
and it's maybe not got enough of the tools it needs to keep
Mm.
producing the types of cells it wants to produce to deal with those viruses.
Hmm.
So we can end up with a bit of an immune suppression picture, which then, if you can imagine the immune system guard being down, it can
Mm.
then leave us more vulnerable to picking other things up as
Yeah.
well. And so it kind of spirals out of control at that point, because the
Mm.
immune system's a little bit more vulnerable, and we can end up with other issues as well. And one example of that which can present all on its own without the viruses as well. But another factor can be, for example, if somebody's got a high amount of mycotoxins in the body. And so
Hmm.
that's a whole different thing aside from viruses. But mycotoxins are substances produced by mold
Yeah.
spores. And again, how I'd view that is that's another hidden factor because I think there's
Mm.
no great way of knowing if somebody has got a high level of mycotoxins in the body without going ahead and testing
Yeah.
for it. A mold can sound really scary. So, when I'm first sort of approaching this topic with clients, because there might be a few things that I'm seeing and I feel as though, could this be part of the picture? Could this be
Mm.
a root cause? It can feel a bit unnerving hearing that for the first time, but
Yeah.
we can be exposed to mold in lots of different ways, whether it's through food, whether it's through living in a water damaged building, for
Mm.
example, or even an office. And our clients that have suspected mold to be in their environment at work.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes we can see it. So you can see this as black mold, maybe at the edge of the windowsill, maybe on the ceilings of bathrooms, anywhere where there's a damp
Mm.
environment. You ideally definitely don't want it in the bedrooms, but sometimes it's on the walls in bedroom.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't even see it, but we might get an idea it's there from smell. And so I've got personal experience of this in a home I used to live in, is that if you leave the home for a weekend or a week or 2 weeks, you've gone away on holiday and you
Mm.
come back, if you have that musty smell in the house,
Mm.
that could be a sign of there being some mold, whether it's under the floorboards, whether it's inside the walls. So
Yeah.
somewhere again where it's just not visible,
Mm.
but it's somewhere there in the environment. And then unfortunately we can, if we're smelling it, we're breathing it in. So
Mm.
it's, if it's in the air, we can be breathing those mold spores in. And again, it doesn't cause a problem for everyone. It's like you're part of life. Like we could be exposed to mold,
Mm.
but somebody could have a really great detox pathway and we get rid of it really
Mm.
well and it doesn't cause a longer term problem.
Yeah.
That's ideally what would happen.
Mm.
Um, but for some people, we can have that mold exposure, and again, that could be years ago, but it's still lingering in the body,
Mm.
causing a problem with the immune system and our cell energy and detox pathways.
Mm, yeah, completely. I think that's a really good overview of kind of the enduring ways in which things can leave a bit of a longer term effect or have a longer term impacts on us as well. And I'd love to know a bit more about, you mentioned kind of the detox pathways and things like that. I guess I'd love to know a bit more about what that process looks like and how people can go about actioning, getting rid of these concerns that may be underlying.
So I think one of the first strategies we'd support our clients with, regardless of what's going on, like what that factor might be,
Yeah.
is it a virus? Is it a mold? Like a couple of things we want to ideally help everybody with is
Mm.
to really make sure their elimination pathways are nice and open and functioning really well. So
Okay.
that is thinking about skin, the largest organ in the body, like how we sort of detoxifying through the skin, through the lungs as well. That it could be as basic as making sure we're taking some really deep breaths in every day
Mm.
of good quality clean air. Um, how our kidneys are functioning, and there's lots of like foods and supplement support that we can use to make sure our kidney filtration processes are working really well.
Hmm.
And then a couple of key areas is around bowel detoxification and what's
Mm.
happening in the liver as well. So we've got lots of enzymes in our liver that control what we call phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3
Hmm.
detoxification pathways that we can support through foods and nutrition and herbal supplements as
Mm.
well. Just a starting point for somebody could be just to make sure they're having a wide range of plant-based foods every day that tick all the different colours. So we've got something from the green category, the yellow, the orange, the blue, purple
Mm.
category, for example. that will make sure to some degree that we've got a wide range of nutrients to support detoxification,
Hmm.
lots of fiber through, fibrous vegetables, through nuts and seeds, maybe oats, quinoa, for
Mm.
example. Um, Good water intake as well. Uh, Lots of brassicas vegetables like broccoli,
Mm.
cauliflower, cabbage, kale, for example. And then checking in on bowel function. So we would want all of our clients to be having at least one good bowel movement a day.
Mm.
That feels like a full bowel movement. It's a well-formed stool, easy to pass. People aren't noticing any undigested food or mucus,
Mm.
for example. And again, lots of fiber. So yeah, the first thing really just making sure all the elimination pathways are working well.
Hmm.
Um, Lots of detoxification support through foods and supplements. Um, Lifestyle strategies like lots of exercise, spending time in nature, sweating, coming back to skin
Yeah.
detoxification. Infrared saunas can be
Mm.
really good. We find that people have a different level of tolerance for infrared saunas. So
Oh, wow.
somebody might only be able to do a few minutes in an infrared sauna, whereas some people might be able to do up to 20 minutes, for
Mm.
example. But if it's something new for people, we would really ask them to observe what their energy feels like afterwards and what it
Okay.
feels like for the rest of the day as
Hmm.
well. So the idea definitely isn't to feel exhausted by an infrared sauna. Um, and if people are, we'd say really sort of, yeah, back off, take it really slow,
Yeah.
go back to hydration. I love glutathione as a supplement. I think that can really help with sort of cell energy production. Um, Sometimes, we would ask clients to support their infrared protocol, sauna protocol with
Mm.
glutathione as well. And things like greens powders like spirulina,
Mm.
chlorella, wheatgrass. The evidence isn't quite there in terms of how effective it is, but I think as it's a really easy and relatively cheap, intervention for people to do, you can mix a organic greens powder with some water, and
Mm.
that could just help with that whole detoxification process as well. Then it can get more involved.
Mm.
We can, in terms of if we're helping somebody with through a protocol, whether it's a mold detoxification protocol, for example, then we'd be using um, more supplements and foods and strategies to really support what we call their innate immune system. So giving
Okay.
their immune system the tools it needs to naturally have the capacity to deal
Mm.
with these things. And we'd be using supplements that we call binders, for example, that can go in and literally do exactly what it says on the tin. So bind to those mycotoxins. And once we've got those elimination pathways nice and open, the hope is that somebody's just excreting those levels of
Mm.
mycotoxins efficiently. Um, think about lots of bile support as well, and bitter foods are good for that. So
Mm.
anything with a bitter taste, like radish, asparagus, artichoke, kale, beetroot, for example, that supports the bile flow. And bile is a great sort of form of method of detoxification because that
Hmm.
bile grabs hold on to soluble toxins and helps us to eliminate that out of the body. So yeah, I'm kind of conscious to focus more in on mycotoxins there. And for viruses, it's a little bit similar, but we're using more antiviral nutrients and herbs
Okay.
rather than binders. But we're still doing all of that immune support work because we want to make the immune system really
Mm.
resilient, and give
And
it
so
the tools.
what looks like what does an antiviral kind of nutrient or yeah, pathway kind of look like then?
Yeah, so there are some antiviral herbs, and it's a little bit what we use would slightly depend on uh, what viruses are causing a problem for
Mm.
somebody. But we've got some great herbs like olive leaf, astragalus, berberine, for example, nutrients like lysine, which is just an amino acid. So it's really
Hmm.
simple as a supplement. but that's particularly good for the herpes family of
Mm.
viruses. Um, and then we can have things that really support the immune system, like vitamin D, vitamin A, zinc,
Mm.
selenium, for example. And sometimes it's about the dose that we use for these things. So I know like
Yeah.
it can be really straightforward to go and buy those supplements, but a lot of it really, for us is understanding how much of each of these
Mm.
somebody will benefit from.
Yeah.
Um, and the test results there can be really helpful to make sure we're dosing at the right level, but also we're keeping a really close eye to how symptoms are changing, because
Okay.
that's a really informative tool, if you like, to know if we're
Mm.
moving in the right direction or not. It's like, yeah, how's someone feeling? Do we need to change the protocol based on their energy or their
Mm.
mood, for example? And retesting helps. It's just, yeah, rechecking on those antibody levels or mycotoxin levels,
Yeah.
for example, just to know, just to get some objective data, like are we actually moving in the right direction, or have we not hit the nail on the head and we need to do things differently
No,
for somebody?
100%. And I think it's really interesting as well because there's quite a lot of discourse surrounding the whole detoxification process, and there's lots of things labeled with detox or detoxify or something along those lines. And I feel like it can be quite easy to fall in that trap, and people end up perhaps buying something or taking a supplement or doing something when it's not necessarily the right choice for them. So I guess for people listening that may be a bit unsure about where to go with that, what would be some kind of maybe do's and do nots that you would have for people when they're trying to say detoxify?
Yeah, I think the first thing would be just to start right at the basics.
Mm.
So, really using food as medicine, lifestyle strategies, making sure they're sleeping well, exercising, maybe some saunaing in there, and a nutrient dense diet, getting lots of fiber, getting the bitters in there to support bile flow. I think the first thing, and this is what we would do with clients in the clinic as well, is like, let's not go to step 5 without doing step 1
Yeah.
first. So I think really going back to the fundamentals, and it can be so powerful. It can feel like, oh, I'm not really doing very much because I'm just changing my diet or my lifestyle.
Yeah.
But that is super, super powerful to get that framework in place first. And if we're thinking about supplement support, because there's so many different kinds of supplements on the market and they're all designed
Mm.
to do something a little bit differently. I think that, and there's time, like, not getting it right the first time can actually cost people in terms of time as well as money as
Mm.
well. So I'd say if it's an option, yeah, working with a nutritional therapist or a naturopath, for example, a TCM practitioner
Mm.
would the best thing to do, because someone can really look at their case at an individual level and understand more specifically for that person what do they need more or less of, and then
Mm-hmm.
provide that guidance on a supplement or a herbal protocol to help
Mm.
take them from A to B. So just to be, yeah, I think there's a lot of value in being very precise in and tailored in what people do.
No, that's really useful, I think. And then would you have any tips for people in just immune support building? Kind of, yeah, say your top tips from what you've experienced or, yeah, from patterns that you've seen throughout your own work.
Yeah, so I think get your vitamin D levels tested. I know that whole sort of topic's been a little bit controversial lately, but I think we would still, for all of our clients, have their vitamin D level tested
Hmm.
and make sure it's in an optimal range. And if it's okay, I probably won't give any numbers away right now, because what's optimal for one person could be quite different for what's optimal for
Yeah.
somebody else. But the NHS cutoff point for vitamin D is generally 50 nanomoles per litre. So
Mm.
if it's less than 50, that I would say that is a problem, and to
Hmm.
supplement with vitamin D to get it over that. And I'd say most people need to get close to 100
Mm.
nanomoles per litre. Um, and that actually gives the immune system, yeah, a lot of capacity to do what it wants to do. It's also anti-inflammatory. It also supports hormone health. Vitamin D and vitamin A together help to keep what we call our T regulatory cells in
Hmm.
check. And they're like the guards of the immune system, if you like. They'll
Mm.
say what's okay, what's not okay, help the immune system to respond appropriately. Um, so those Treg cells are really, really important, and vitamin A. Um, Again, without testing, I'd say just lots of vitamin A rich food. So that's
Mm.
everything that's really dark green, like kale, spinach, collard greens, dandelion greens, chard. Get vitamin A from egg yolk as well, and all the orange and yellow fruits and vegetables like squash, sweet potato, etc. So
Mm.
really thinking about that. Zinc rich foods, the seafood, pumpkin seeds are really important. So nutrient wise, it's making sure we've got those core nutrients that help the
Yeah.
immune system out.
Mm.
Um, Secondly, I think if we can take away things that are stressing the immune system out, that would be amazing. So the immune system can get to work to the things it needs to start sort of dealing with, rather than everyday toxins or food choices
Mm.
that are causing a more of a burden. So sugars are right up there, refined sugars, sort of minimizing those as much as possible, lower caffeine levels, lower alcohol, for example, lower processed foods.
Mm.
Um, Personally, in our clinic for complex fertility cases, we would ask clients to really consider their gluten and dairy intake,
Okay.
to support their immune system.
Mm.
Um, and those things again, like just through food, through diet, really, is that if we can take away what might be causing an immune burden in the background,
Hmm.
it leaves the immune system more free to do other things. Um, and stress management as well. So there's a massive link, and people probably feel this as well. There's a huge link between stress and immunity.
Yeah.
And so when we're stressed, the immune system is definitely not working in the way we would like it to.
Mm.
So
No,
easier
completely.
said than done. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely much easier said than done. But I think that's, yeah, some really useful tips as well. And I think kind of bringing it back finally to fertility, I'd love to know, I mean, you mentioned a few of them there, like hormone dysregulation, for example, but how your immune response can impact your fertility, just to, yeah, kind of sum it all up in one at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can impact hormone levels. It can impact, we've got three different types of estrogen. It can impact the ratios between the three of those. It can impact the immune system in the endometrial lining, and so
Mhm.
it feeds into healthy implantation. It can feed into increased oxidative stress that impacts sperm quality and egg quality, and then impacts pregnancy duration. So it can feed into
Mm.
things like pregnancy loss risk
Yeah.
as well.
So just about everything.
Just about everything. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really useful. And I think that's definitely something that I think a lot of people may not have heard about or even considered. So I think, yeah, detoxification pathways can be really be a useful tool. So thank you so much for delving into that as well. And I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to add to this topic or anything else that you think you want to say?
um, No, no, and I know to a lot of sort of listeners, this might feel like, yeah, quite daunting, really. But
Mm,
I guess I just want to stress that these are the sorts of situations we would see in more complex cases. It's not for, it doesn't apply to everybody that we work
yeah.
with. And there's a lot of strategies that we can employ, that really boost fertility without sort of starting to explore these more complex areas.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even some of the responses or strategies that you gave are not always the most complex strategies. So even if it's a complex case, I think it's important to remember that there are still simple things that you can do, as you mentioned, like with foods or saunas or exercise that can really help detoxify the body.
Yeah. Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming back on, Dee. We've been very lucky to have you on twice now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been really great to be here. Thanks, Jess.